Hey everybody, Mr. Smith here. In this video we're going to talk about something called the quadratic formula. Maybe you have seen this thing before, maybe you have not. Regardless, we're going to talk about it in this video. I'm going to show you how to use it. It is this equation right here. This equation right here. I know it's very big and it might look ugly and intimidating, but I promise it is not as bad as it seems. Okay, it's actually one of the most useful equations that you'll ever come across in any math class, and probably one of the most simple to execute. So, what do we use this thing for? Well, when we want to solve a quadratic equation in standard form, we can always use the quadratic formula. So you'll talk about this more in Algebra 2, but you can always use that. It's kind of like a get out of jail free card. Remember, standard form looks like this: ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So your equation must look like this. The one you're trying to solve must look like this in order for you to use the quadratic formula. If you need to manipulate it to get it there, you can. So let's do a quick example. We are told to solve the equation 2x squared minus 5x plus 3 equals 0 using the quadratic formula. This thing is in standard form, so I know I can use the quadratic formula. I'm just going to rewrite it over here so that we don't have to keep looking back up there. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Okay, so there's our equation. So I've broken this up into steps to try to make the process a little bit more simple, less intimidating. I promise if it looks like a lot right now, that's okay. With a little bit of practice, I promise that this equation will eventually become something that you're comfortable with, probably something that you're confident with. So step one, what we're going to do is plug A, B, and C, all those values, into the formula. So remember, in standard form, it's ax squared plus bx plus c. So I've got a, b, and c all running around in my equation. And what I want to do is take those values and plug them into the quadratic formula. So we're just going to do it one at a time. I'm going to rewrite the equation, except instead of b's and a's and c's, I'm going to use these numbers up here. So first I have negative b. Well, b in my equation is the middle number, and it's a negative 5. So I have to be careful here. This is going to be a double negative. It's negative b, but b is negative 5. So it's negative 5. Okay. And then I have plus or minus. I'll tell you what that means here in a second. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. Again, b is negative 5 squared minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 3, and all of that is underneath the square root, and it's all divided by 2 times a, which is 2. Okay, so notice how I have not really done anything with my numbers yet. I've just taken all the values and plugged them into my equation. I haven't actually evaluated anything. Okay, so that's my first step. It's just getting all my numbers into the equation. Now I'm going to calculate b squared minus 4ac and take the square root. Really, all I'm saying is you're going to start with what's underneath the square root, calculate that number, and try to move inside out and do one piece at a time. So, oops. Let's go down here. I have x equals negative 5. That's positive 5. I can simplify that. Plus or minus the square root of, and this is where I'm going to start evaluating, but I'm just going to do one step at a time. That's kind of the name of the game here. Negative 5 squared, that's negative 5 times negative 5 is 25, minus 4 times 2 times 3. So 4 times 2 is 8, and 8 times 3 is 24. In this example, all of those were positives, but if one of those is a negative number, you just have to keep track of your negative signs. You might have to subtract a negative, so you just got to pay attention to what you're doing. Don't lose track of any negatives. Okay, and then down on the bottom, I have 2 times 2, which is 4. Okay, so now let's just keep going. I'm just going to keep doing one thing at a time. I can simplify this even a little bit more. It's 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 minus 24, which is 1, over 4. And now let's go up here and simplify it one more time. I calculated b squared minus 4ac, this number inside of here. Now I'm going to take the square root of that. So x equals 5 plus or minus, well, the square root of 1 is just 1. Or square root is just something that if you multiply by itself, you get this number, and clearly that's just 1. And then I have 4 down here on the bottom. Okay, so this is where I'm at this point. All I've done is just calculate one thing at a time, going step by step, little by little. Okay, you don't have to do it all at once. Probably the most helpful thing to remember, the most helpful principle to guide your process in solving these is just do one thing at a time. You can break it up into chunks, do one thing at a time. You don't have to do it all at once. All right, so now using the value from step 2, meaning this guy right here, we're going to calculate the rest of the formula. Don't forget about the plus minus. So I'm going to tell you what that means right now. So let's write down what we have. We have x equals 5 plus or minus 1 over 4. Okay, so now I'm going to calculate this. I have to understand what this plus or minus does, though. The plus or minus is really giving me two different scenarios. Okay, it's saying 5 plus 1 or 5 minus 1. So it's giving me two different problems, basically, to solve. So I like to think about it like this. I'm going to break this up into two problems. The first one is going to be 5 plus 1 divided by 4. And the second one is going to be 5 minus 1 divided by 4. Two scenarios. You could either do plus or you could do minus. 5 plus or minus 1. That's all that means. Okay, so it's breaking it up into two problems. So now let's solve both of these. 5 plus 1 is 6 divided by 4. If I want to simplify that, 6 over 4, both of those are divisible by 2, so I could simplify that to 3 over 2. Let's do this one now. 5 minus 1 is 4 over 4, and 4 divided by 4 is clearly just 1. And I can't simplify these anymore, so it turns out these 3 over 2 and 1 are my two solutions. These are the two x values that make this initial equation true. Those are the x values I would need to plug into this equation in order to make this whole thing equal 0. Okay, so that's what we've done. We found the numbers that make the equation true. So my solutions are, my solutions to this equation are x equals 3 over 2 and x equals 1. Okay, I hope this was clear. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks, guys.